Okay. All right. Now we have today and then what? 2 more Sundays, correct? I think that's right.
22nd and the 29th. You're done.
Oh, this is it.
One more Sunday.
We got one more Sunday after today. Okay, we got to roll. Thanks to Brother Elon last week. He shared some really good thoughts. Thank you, Elon, on some alleged discrepancies in the scriptures. And anyway, today we're going to pick up on evolution, and going to go over it pretty quickly because I want to introduce the moral argument. Does that sound like a plan? Now, I think I showed you this slide, so we're going to move right on. Okay, now I have a couple of examples of evolution I'd like for us to share. By the way, do we have visitors or somebody? We got one back there, right, David? Patty, would you like a book? One of our booklets? Would you pass that back? Anybody else? I had a few more printed up. Okay, good morning. Glad to have you all. Anyone else? Okay, pass one way on back there, L.A. Another? Okay, I got Sonia to print us about 10 more, and so now we have 7. So, okay. Y'all help me remember to, ask that as we begin our next quarter or continue our study of evidences. The idea is this quarter we've been studying about the existence of God, and then next quarter we're going to study about the inspiration of the Bible. That's the primary goal. And we may get into the deity of Christ, but I doubt it. So I was thinking, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot about that. Next quarter we're going to pick up with John. We're just flying through. I think we're in chapter 8. And don't get rid of your books because we'll pick up again when we start again. Is that okay? But this will give us, sort of some closure on one aspect of Christian evidences, okay? I hope that you'll join me in the John class. How many of you were in that before? Yay. Can you come back? You got other plans maybe? You can't, Jerry? You mad at me?
You yelled at me, I'm not coming.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I apologize. Does that do any good? Probably not. Okay. All right. Well, it'll be a good study. As I recall, we are at the Feast of the Tabernacles, which started in chapter 7. And in 7, Jesus is, the water of life. In chapter 8, he is the light of the world. And so we're going to enjoy that study again and hopefully get through chapter 12. That will be the goal for that quarter. Okay, 2 aspects of evolution I wanted us to look at very quickly. One has to do with transmission of acquired traits, and then the other is mutation. So jump in here and make some comments, if you would, Brother Elon or Howard, others of you who've spoken to me after class from time to time, and Doug.
I just want to start off because of my own ignorance.
Sorry about the poll.
That's okay.
Okay.
But like whenever the theory of evolution and stuff first came on, do you think that they were trying to find a way to debunk God, or do you think that they were actually believing this stuff?
I don't think their goal was, first of all, this is just an opinion.
Sure. No,
okay.
That's why I asked.
And my opinion is, I don't think they were sitting around saying, well, what could we come up with to debunk God? I don't really think that was the goal. But obviously what they, ended up doing, did, in fact, or I say did, was an attempt to do that, if that makes sense. Dan?
Doug sat behind the pole on purpose.
Oh, does he? Okay. What other, Elon, what do you think about that question?
Aldous Huxley, and I passed this out as a handout sheet last week. Aldous Huxley wrote, he gave his definition why he was an atheist. It was a very self-centered, selfish thing. That's the way he wanted to find there was no God.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, I think that, some of these people were just, scientists, and so then that led to some of their conclusions. which we're going to make a comment about that momentarily. Yeah, I really don't like that poll. But I can't, well, now I lose your beautiful daughter there. Okay, so transmission of acquired characteristics. What is this about? Only the fittest survive. Only the fittest survive. And so here's an example that I read about for the giraffe. So long-necked giraffes survived because they were the fittest. And so what happened is they mated with others, giraffes, and then they passed on these characteristics. Okay, but here's a few questions. Why did not other leaf-eating animals develop long necks?
Because they were set up to crawl.
Because their bushes were lower?
No, they crawled up in the tree.
Oh, they crawled up in the tree. Okay.
They're gonna say,
All right. Anybody else? Why did the female giraffes not develop as long necks? At least, I wondered about that. This was not in my article that I studied, but does that make sense? Is that a reasonable question? And then what did surviving giraffes produce that was superior? They didn't produce many cows. And then somebody might argue, are they superior? What did giraffes produce? They produced giraffes. Maybe at this point we ought to make a distinction in macroevolution and microevolution. Who can tell me about that? What's the difference in the two?
Changing species.
Okay, John, say it, speak loudly.
It's macroevolution. You're able to change from one species to another.
Okay.
Micro would just be changes within the species.
Okay, so macro, you got a fish, and I'm just putting it in simple terms, and then some way or the other, it eventually is able to get on the land as an alligator or something, and then that in turn, blah, blah, blah. I've always argued that evolution is just strictly impossible because no one kind can become another kind. Now, you may have some changes, like you say, within the species. That's where you can do
inbreed.
a pick-a-poo and a poodle, or no, a poodle and a Pekingese and get a pick-a-poo, but you can't get a cat. And so you can have some changes there. Micro would include too, like I was reading about this again last night as I was studying immunity, from certain diseases, or has to do with maybe immunity to certain antibiotics, according to this article that I read, last evening. So, what do you think about that?
Isaac Asimov wrote a book many years ago called The Wellsprings of Life. In that he said, it has been proven that animals, the things that we find in nature, they don't change into other animals. And he gave the idea that it was sudden, all at once, which is a greater miracle than what God did. God prepared it.
Yeah.
According to him, this change is real rapid, and it happens in evolution, which
Well,
gets rid of Darwin.
Yeah. Well, in fact, it was sudden, when God snapped his fingers, right, and said, let it be. Doug?
Is there a difference between the microevolution and adaptation? Or is
That'd be very similar, wouldn't it?
Or is adaptation part of?
Yeah, seems like that would be part of it, to me. I haven't really thought about those two terms, connected
But,
together.
if you take the same thing and put it in two different environments,
Right.
over time, they're going to adapt differently to their environment.
Right. Yes, sir, Brother Law.
My question would be about the giraffes, the offspring.
Mm-hmm.
If it has a short neck when it's born, how does it get along?
Well, it's because these acquired traits are passed on,
Right. It cannot reach those leaves
So they let it die.
with a short neck.
Right.
It would die off.
Well, as I said, the idea, at least behind, the transmission of acquired traits is that that this is passed on in birth, you know, the birth of the animal, and then because of what, you know, its parents were, you know, as far as their long necks are concerned, now it would eventually develop the same. But, I mean, I think that's what they would say to that. Okay, survival of the fittest does not account for the formation of new species. It only separates the strong from the weak. What's the problem with that? I don't see any problem, do you? I mean, it's just obvious.
That's what's wrong with it.
Pardon?
That's what's wrong with it throughout the net.
Yeah.
It's a survival of the fittest.
Mhm.
Because all the rest of them run around and eat high.
Yeah.
Food, it would eventually, would not have the energy and the strength, and so it would eat off by varmints.
Okay. Survival of the fittest just makes sense to me, really. I don't see any problem with that. But to say that the survival entails, you know, handing down, you know, certain traits because it has survived, that's quite a different thing, isn't it? I mean, if you've got a county that's full of rabbits and wolves, it looks like to me that one of them's going to win out, you know, before it's over. But that has nothing to do with handing down certain traits or, you know, to another generation of animals or whatever.
They're always applying that to the animal kingdom. When you start applying it to people, it doesn't work out. Because like, say, in British royalty, all the inbreeding, thinking they're keeping the bloodline pure, what they did was corrupted the bloodline with the worst of the traits.
Right.
And you ended up with idiots and people with physical deformities and all this kind of stuff.
You especially see that, you know, among the Roman emperors, you know, don't you?
Well, you see it in the British monarchs very much too. They just kept, well, even in Russia, you know, hemophilia was
Yeah, that
pretty
Russian,
rampant in the
didn't the
families.
last Russian czars,
Yeah.
didn't he have a son that was,
So, yeah, hemophilia.
Right.
So it was like, okay, what do we do now? Do we just cast off the babies because they're not, well, you don't know if they're perfect or not for a while.
okay,
That's the worst thing that
So it
Darwin
doesn't
did.
have in the realm of humanity.
okay, very good. Elon?
Darwin wrote a book called Descent of Man. And in that book, he said men are superior to women by passed on traits. And one of the things he used is he said, well, men's brains are 10% larger than female brains. Therefore, they're not as smart as men are. Well, Einstein's brain was 10% smaller than the average brain. Obviously, quality of brains is far better than quantity.
Yeah. Wonder if Darwin was married, you know?
Pardon?
Was Darwin married?
You know, that's a good question.
Yeah. Not for long. Okay. All right. It's not the quantity, it's the quality, isn't it? Okay, many cases not even struggle for existence. Let's see. All right, let's say something quickly about mutations. Here it's suggested that sudden alteration within a species, like a mutation, is the means by which various variations between species occurred. For example, was it in the 60s that thalidomide was quite a popular drug, or 50s and seemed like early 60s maybe. And so you had a lot of babies that were born physically challenged and perhaps otherwise. And so the drug changed the hereditary code of the developing baby.
But not in a positive way. They were all negative. 100% were negative.
Okay,
And it was not, you couldn't pass
Yeah.
it on.
yeah. And y'all are sort of getting ahead of me, which is great because you're so smart, okay? But this still does not explain man's existence on the earth, does it?
I mean, I think of a girl in our elementary school. Of course, all the kids noticed her because her wrists were attached at her shoulders.
Right.
She had no arms.
Yeah.
That wasn't a blessing in her life,
No, no.
and she was one of those babies.
Yeah, I saw some of those pictures, like their hands were, attached to their shoulders, and like you're saying. Let's see, that changes occur is undeniable, but these changes do not account for the totality or totally new type of organism. We've already talked about that. Okay, now here's where Linda and your comment, John,
Well, I
came in.
think some mutations that have been passed on has been where they've been exposed to radiation and things like that, where it has
Right.
truly altered their genes.
But still
and
not for
DNA.
positive results.
Yeah, it's never positive.
Okay, the seedless orange is mutation.
That's positive.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. It can't reproduce. And what about, say, it still, is not some other, kind of fruit. What about hornless cattle?
I mean, I might say some of those are within the DNA. They're not damaged DNA. Just like you breed a different kind of dog, you didn't create a new dog. You just, filtering down genetic information. It was in the DNA all along.
Okay. All right, very good. Anybody else?
I think when you start talking of like the cattle, short-legged sheep, some of the dog variations, people are doing that. And they're seeing the trait and saying, oh, that one came out shorter than the others. If we had another short-legged one, then we'd have dachshunds, and they could go in the tunnels. And so those are where man has played with it.
Right.
And even then, they have really messed up some, because some of that planned has ended up with, what do they call it, double docs or something, and the dogs end up blind and deaf.
Wow. I think about those little horses, that men have developed. I saw something where they had a horse as a pet, was running around in the house, just like a dog would or whatever.
They can have severe deformities.
Right. Okay, mutations rarely occur, and when they do, they're generally deteriorative. That's what, John just mentioned a while ago, instead of being beneficial. Seedless oranges cannot reproduce. Hornless cattle have lost a means of defense, and they have to be protected. Okay, mutations are incapable of creating anything new. They change existing structures. Still doesn't account for another, kind. All right, well, let's see. That's all I have to say about that. Now, let's hear your final comments on any of this. Okay, Stephen?
Darwin married his first cousin. They had 10 children. Two or three of them died early, and some of them couldn't have children. So there was a lot of hereditary problems.
Okay. All right.
She obviously wasn't very smart.
Yeah, all her fault.
They were both from Kentucky or Alabama, I believe.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. Phew. That was close. Glad you didn't say Tennessee or Mississippi. Okay.
At that time, the instruments that they had, when they looked in the microscope, whatever power they had, they thought it was just little blobs. They thought they were looking at just little protoplasmic, and then so there's the unorganized tissue that we all started from. And as we get more powerful microscopes, the deeper we look, the more complicated it gets.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really complicated.
It really
doesn't
is.
Start out simple and get more complex. It's complicated at the cellular
Right.
level.
Did you say flu?
Yeah, Anthony Flew, had the debate with Dr. Warren in 78, I think it was, 77, 78. I know I was, anyway, I'm the one that handled the transparencies. We didn't have PowerPoint in those days. It was just handwritten transparencies. And then also I drew a lot of the charts for that debate. But at any rate, a few decades later, he came out with a book. Some of you perhaps have read it, There Is No God, with a line through the word no. Have you seen that? Okay, Flew was the atheist from England, but at any rate, DNA is what, changed his mind. I've told you before, Linda and I listened to forensic files, especially on the way home at night, here Sunday night and Wednesday nights. And it's just amazing to me. They'll have someone in prison. I heard one just the other day, like for 12 years. And at the time they had some, a physical sample of some sort, but it was so small, it was like a speck of dandruff or something, that they didn't have the knowledge or the equipment or whatever to analyze it. And then several years later, they did, and the guy ended up being released from prison, because the DNA, didn't match, him. And that's just amazing to me. How could evolution come up with something, as complex as DNA? It's just incredible, really. Okay, now, I wanted to introduce our next topic here. Okay, moral, it's going to, let's say, the moral argument. Oh, okay. Let's see. I can't get the G to work very good, Carol. Okay. All right. Okay. 3 basic arguments that we've looked at in class. One, the cosmological argument that has to do with the general characteristics of the world, the conclusion of which would be that, God is responsible, for it. General characteristics like it's the world's contingency, the fact that it changes, and what's behind that. How do you explain that? Nothing explains it. It's explained by itself, or God's behind it. So we looked at that, and then we looked at the design argument. That's where we look at the order and the arrangement in the world, which points to design. And then, of course, you can't have design without what? A designer. And so we looked at that, and then we looked at 2 objections to it, namely the so-called problem of evil, and then also the problem of evolution. So now we want to look at what's called the moral argument. Now, the moral argument focuses on the relationship between God and man. We're not talking about, God and the world at this point, like we did on the cosmological or the teleological argument. And so a lot of the reasoning here comes out of classes that I've had. I took Dr. Thomas Warren for every class he taught at Freed-Hardeman and every class he taught at Harding Graduate School. And so you might expect that some of the reasoning is reflected here. And then I helped him in the 2 debates, the Warren-Flew debate and also the Warren-Matson debate, which took place in Tampa, Florida. The former was in Denton, Texas. But at any rate, so there's different ways to look at this. One has to do with can the moral code of an individual or society be criticized? Can it be criticized? And that's what we're about to look at now. For example, have any of you ever read C.S. Lewis's, any of C.S. Lewis's works? Have you read his Mere Christianity?
Well, the one that I'm most interested in is when he gets out screw tape letters.
Oh, yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, Screw Tape Letters is good. The Problem of Pain is also a very good book. I used to have my students read that. And of course, I taught on human suffering. But in Mere Christianity, he talks about a higher law. And that's going to be another dimension of the moral argument we'll talk about. And then we're going to say something about the conscience. So there's kind of different ways to look at the moral argument and God's relationship to man. So here's one. If the moral code of an individual or society can be criticized as to real moral wrong, then there must be some objective standard other than the moral code. If it can be criticized as to real right and wrong. Okay, the next line premise would be the moral code can be criticized, therefore there must be some kind of objective standard other than the code. Does this make sense so far? Pretty simple, isn't it? All right, and then if there's an objective standard, then the argument is God exists. There is an objective standard, therefore God exists. Okay? So what do we mean when we say can be criticized as to real moral wrong? What do we mean by that?
Brother Warren used Nazi Germany.
Right,
Example.
right.
You're probably going to go into that.
I am. Go ahead, Elon.
Wait a minute. I'll leave it to you.
Okay. All right. Now, Brother Elon just mentioned the Nazis, and that's what we want to look at right now. So, have any of you read the Nuremberg trials? Have you actually seen the movie about the Nuremberg trials? Kevin Costner, I think, played the district attorney, which was, let me think, Justice Robert Jackson. And I was very disappointed in that movie, in one aspect of it. Now, I'll tell it to you in just a second. But the Nazis' argument essentially was this, that they had certain needs and desires. Like any community might say, we have our own needs, we have our own desires. And then they said, we enacted laws to satisfy our needs and our desires. So see, the first point is, this is what we want. Okay, now let's make some laws to achieve what we want. And so what their laws, said in effect was, we need to exterminate, certain people. The Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, and so forth. Insane people, and people who were mentally deficient, and so forth and so on. And so that's what our society wanted. And so we've enacted these laws in order to achieve our goals. And then they argued it would have been wrong for us not to have obeyed our laws. And so they were arguing it was our moral obligation to keep our laws. Then they argued that you are now passing judgment on us by a law that we are not subject to, which would be British and or American law. Okay? And they said, we're not subject to those laws. We're subject to the laws of Germany. Y'all are subject, they would argue, to the laws of America, or others of you are subject to the laws of England. All right, now, what Justice Jackson did was he appealed to a higher law. And notice what he says, a law that transcends the provincial. Sorry, Carol, I'm going to have to get rid of some of your words here. I hate to do it, though. Let's see. Provincial. I was going to write it up here, but that's okay. What does this word mean right here, Pete? And you know what? Excuse me, Jenny. I always erase my board, right? So what's her problem? Okay, Jenny?
Provincial means like for a certain area?
Yeah. Provincial means the area, okay? And then also, he used the word transient. Okay, transient has to do with time. And so Justice Jackson, argued that there was this other law that transcended the provincial, which would be what? It transcends Germany, it transcends England, it transcends America, it transcends all, countries in the entire world. Furthermore, this law transcends all time. You see, it's not, Germany's, they really, let's see, Hitler started his deal in what, 1933? Wasn't it about
23 was where he started writing.
Okay, I think primarily 33 though was where he got off the ground. But anyway, and then all the way till the war ended in 45. Let's see, was that May? That was May finally, but I think he died in April. Is that right or wrong?
Committed suicide.
Yeah, but wasn't it April?
April.
Yeah, I thought that was right. I forgot my exact dates on that. And then, but anyway, so this law transcends all countries, and it also transcends all time, not just 33 to 45, all time whatsoever. Now here I want to get back to Lewis. Lewis argued about this same law in his little book called Mere Christianity, a higher law. I don't know that Justice Jackson, I'd have to reread, that part of the trial. I don't remember if he used the words higher law, but this is his language right here. It rises above the provincial and the transient. He might have just said a law. I don't remember if he said the word higher or not. I just can't recall. Okay, so here we go. And this is the way that Dr. Warren drew this in his debate.
David,
Yes, ma'am.
when you put Hitler's view that you need to get rid of all these people back to survival of the fittest, like they would say, if a child has cerebral palsy, we need to eliminate that child.
Right.
If he'd had DNA, he would have said, well, we need to eliminate the parents because those
Because they brought them
parents-
into
yeah.
the world. Yeah. Very good observation. Wow.
I think it's kind of.
I'm really
dangerous.
glad that she married me, or I married her, or which way, Jenny?
It's kind of dangerous when you want to get rid of anybody that does not agree with your point of view about things. That's basically.
Well, it's not difficult, Jenny, if you're a selfish, narcissistic, evil person, though, is it? Yeah. Very good.
And you get to the point where who gets to decide who gets to be eliminated.
Yeah,
That's where survival of the fittest.
exactly.
David, I can give you an example.
Hey, by the way, excuse me just a minute, Elon. It just popped in my head, okay? Animal Farm.
Yeah.
Remember reading that?
Yep.
I asked my granddaughters if they've read that, and no, we never heard of it. I said, you need to read that book. Or Orwell's 1984, which we've passed.
What was that TV series we watched? You know, where it was an alternate Germany one.
Oh, yeah, what was that? Where,
The Man in the High Tower.
yeah. Any of you ever heard of that? It's where the United States was divided up into, some of it was German control, some of it was Japanese control. It was totally weird. I quit watching it. I couldn't. Linda really liked that. Hey, by the way, I got to tell you this. I just made the comment about it. I'm glad that we were able to get together. 56 years as of yesterday. Yay. How'd our anniversary go? Well, she went shopping, and I worked in the shop, and so I told her the day before, believe it or not, listen to this. Sorry, I'm getting off the subject just a little bit, but yesterday, for the first time, Friday, for the first time since we've been in Cookville, I went into a, what was the name of that department store? Belk Department Store. And there was another one called Kohl's Department Store. And that,
Really selfish, looking for his own.
yeah, I need a belt here, and that's what I'm going to get for Christmas. If you paid attention to this belt, it is like gone. It's barely holding together. But anyway, that experience was like a total of 30 minutes, okay, which wore me out. Anyway, so I had said something to her, I think it was the day before, wasn't it, about the anniversary cards?
No, it was in the car.
Was it in that day? Okay, it was that day. We were in the car, and I said, well, I need to get you an anniversary card. And she said, well, I hadn't got one for you either. And then here's her suggestion, okay? You ready for this? She said, let's go to Dollar General, and we'll find the cards, and you pick out a card for me, and I'll pick out a card for you, and we'll read them to each other, and then put them back on the shelf. Boy, that's pitiful, isn't it, Cindy?
You're smart. I think it's smart.
Anyway, that's what you do after you've been married 56 years. Oh, me.
We didn't do it because David was overwhelmed by the two stores.
Yeah.
He couldn't handle it.
Boy, and then I didn't find a belt. Did you know you cannot find a belt at either of those stores that's 38 inches long? Okay.
Small, medium, long.
It's a 38 to 40. And I actually took this belt off, put the other one on and all that stuff in the store, and the little flapper deal, stuck out here like forever. And I told Linda, I said, I'm not going to like that. That thing's... Anyway, sorry. Okay, so here we go. You ready? We got just enough time to do this. So here's the higher law right here that transcends what? The provincial and the transient. Okay, and it is authoritative over the law of Germany. Now, the law of Germany is authoritative over the people of Germany. And then the law of England is authoritative over the people of England, correct? The law of England has no authority over, people from Germany, right? And the law of Germany has no authority over people from England, all right? But there's this thing called the higher law that is all over, it has authority over other nations, as you can see, pointed out up here. Isn't that a great chart that he did that? He really, drove into us, to make charts. We'd say today PowerPoints, to illustrate our points. And interestingly enough, when I did that at UT in their doctoral program, I had one professor named L.B. Seebeck, and he would always write on my papers, this is really, really good. It'll be very beneficial to you in your teaching career, blah, blah, blah. And then I had another professor named, Dr. Sheldon Cohen, and I put one in a paper for him, and he wrote, this is not acceptable for doctoral work. So I learned, don't do it for Dr. Cohen, do it for Dr. Seebeck. So he had different opinions about that. But I think they're very good because they illustrate. Can't you see it a little bit better? Okay, got a comment on that? Anybody? Okay, we can go ahead and introduce this. Moral progress and moral degeneration. Now what's going on here is this. If you can measure real moral progress, say from T sub 1 to T sub 10, as to real right and wrong, then guess what? Same conclusion. There must be what? Must be some objective standard by which to measure it. If it's really right and really wrong. So we'll pick up with this next week. Thank y'all very much.